Hello everyone, my name is Steve Miller, and today I'm going to be talking about qualities of character. There's lots of examples of quality of character that are out there. Specifically, I'm going to be focusing on the quality of character of servant leadership. Servant leadership. What is it about? In this case, we're looking at a quote from Robert Greenleaf, who wrote extensively on the topic in the 1970s and still very relevant today. The key that we look at with Robert Greenleaf is that when you're dealing with servant leadership, you're really talking about serving other individuals. The goal here is making sure that you, as a leader, are servicing other individuals, helping them to grow, making sure that they become the best version of themselves that they can be. There's lots of different individuals that write about servant leadership. As you can see here, I've given you some examples of individuals that have discussed the topic, Robert Greenleaf being one of them, John Maxwell, who we've looked at in the course that we're looking at right now, Ken Blanchard, and then obviously we have lots of examples in the Bible with our own Jesus Christ. When we're talking about servant leadership is really about leading humbly. Here I have two examples. One is from Greenleaf himself, which discusses being a servant first, being a leader that's going to go out and help the individuals that are out there, have self-sacrifice. And the second one comes from the Bible, comes from the book of Luke, and it talks about if you are going to be a leader and you want to be known as a leader, then you have to be an individual that's willing to serve first and serve everyone. When you're discussing servant leadership, we're really looking at two theories that are out there. One is the servant leadership that comes from Jesus Christ. And this is really going to come from the religious perspective. Here, we're talking about being humble, serving others, really working to make sure that everyone is taken care of. The other theory that we're going to have in terms of servant leadership is really going to come from Robert Greenleaf. And Greenleaf is really going to come from the secular world. His focus in terms of servant leadership was really more poised or pointed toward dealing with the business world and just how people in general could be servant leaders in their work and in their community, but it's not going to have the same aspects that we would see in the religious examples of Jesus Christ, but still draws a lot of the same similarities in terms of working with humility, serving first, encouraging other people to be servants as well too. So even though they come one secular, one religious, they still definitely hit a lot of the same key components. When we're dealing with servant leadership, we have lots of examples of individuals that are well known and sometimes not well known. In this case, I have a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., civil rights leader from the 50s and the 60s. And as you can see here, he, in his quote, is discussing one of the key components of servant leadership, which is dealing with what are you doing for the people that are out there? And that's a really key component of servant leadership is what are you doing to help or impact other people? The next individual is Gandhi, and Gandhi is a civil rights leader as it comes into the struggle between India and Great Britain back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And he was also an individual that was known for his servant leadership. And once again, he's still echoing the same thing, that the main goal here is we want to serve others. We want to help others. We want to be selfless. When you're dealing with servant leadership, we obviously have a very good example in terms of Jesus Christ. And there's lots of examples in the Bible of Jesus Christ talking about serving. This is one right here. Here I am among you as one who serves. And this is really a really key example of the type of servant leadership that Jesus Christ exemplified during his life. There are 5 fundamental indicators when we're talking about servant leadership. And these indicators here are really focused from the religious perspective. So here we're looking more at servant leadership as we would see through Jesus Christ. As you can see here, we're once again hitting those key components of talking about being self-sacrificing, recognizing, being visible, really trying to lead people in the right direction and do the right things and be very Christ-like in how we do things. But how does this all fit into coaching? I decided to use a direct quote from the book that we were using in the course from Bruce Brown. And this quote really spoke to me in terms of the servant leadership piece, because in this one, Brown really talks about coaching as a ministry. He really talks about it not as a part-time, but as a full-time job, a job in which coaches are really trying to work with athletes to add value, really trying to help them be better people, be better individuals. And a lot of those things are the same things we look at in terms of servant leadership. As coaches, we're really trying to work with our athletes for life lessons well beyond the game itself. So I think working with athletes to be servant leaders, not only on the teams that we coach, but in the communities and in the world that they will go to, I think is something that's very important. One of the key parts of servant leadership that I really like to focus on is the empowerment piece. And I kind of call this the crux of coaching. The reason why I do is empowerment is really about transferring power. In this case, we're really talking about transferring power from the coach to the athlete and really empowering that athlete to go out there and not only be a servant, but have humility, have character, have values. So there's a lot of things as coaches we can empower our athletes to do. So I think there's 3 really important questions that as coaches that are seeking to be servant leaders that we need to ask ourselves. Number 1, how do you empower others as a coach? Do those you serve grow? And do those athletes that you serve, do they also seek to serve? I think those are important questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we work through our coaching career and as we coach athletes and look to serve those athletes. I think those are questions that can help us and guide us in the direction that we're looking to go. Some of the other things that we look at when we're a servant leader is, are we uplifting people? Are we making their situation better? Are we helping them to be better? It's not always easy to do the right thing, but the right thing is something that should be done at all times. Jackie Robinson up in the one corner, he talks about what type of impact are you making on the individuals' lives that you're out there. And I think servant leadership goes a long ways in terms of trying to make an impact. And I think leadership is something that, you're looking to do right all the time, just not some of the time, and especially when people are not watching. If you're going to be a servant leader, it's something that we need to do on an all-the-time basis. We see lots of examples of servant leadership in the Bible, and we've already talked about a couple examples already with Luke. Here we have one from Mark and one from Matthew. The one from Matthew is really, I think, an important quote of the Bible in terms of Jesus really coming down and really wanting to serve man. That was really his goal. That was really his main focus and key point. So when you're dealing with servant leadership, especially when you're looking for a great example, Jesus Christ and really his main purpose for being here for us, I think is really one that can give us a lot of faith in what it is we're trying to do as coaches and particularly servant leaders. For everything that servant leadership is, there's some things that servant leadership is not. So as you can see from this list that I put behind me, there's some things that, as a servant leader, they're the nots. They're the things that it's not. It's not going to be passive. It's not going to have excuses for failings. It's not going to be a refuge for those that are willing not to lead. It's the opposite. We want to have the ability and courage to lead. It's not going to be making people happy all the time. As a servant leader, as a coach, you're going to make decisions that people aren't going to be happy with. And it's certainly not about following with the crowd. Leadership is not about being a follower. It is about being a leader and stepping forward and helping other people to become leaders and make good decisions for themselves. Here are some examples of some leaders, individuals that I look at as servant leaders that are out there and can give us examples of people that we can look toward in terms of our education and how we want to try and emulate or be. Final thoughts in terms of servant leadership. Number one, you want to make sure that the individuals that you work with see you as a servant leader, and that in turn that will give them the courage for them to also be servant leaders as well. You want to make sure that people know that you care. I always go with the old quote in education that says that, students don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think as servant leadership, it's the same thing. You have to show people that you care about them before they really care about your message as well. You have to invest in your people. I think this is important. As a coach, we have to invest in our athletes. And a lot of the conversations that we've had and books that we've read in this course have discussed about us investing in the individuals that we work with and work for, and how we can invest in them and make them better individuals. And don't place restrictions on your willingness to go out and serve. You should want to be, as a coach, as a servant leader, you should want to serve in any capacity that is needed and or necessary. And finally, in the words of Joe Ehrmann, what is a coach's job? To love the athletes that they serve. And I think that's a very powerful message that goes along with the quality of character of servant leadership, is that our job is to love the athletes that we have and really show that we care about them and we want them to be the best they can. And I think a quality of character such as servant leadership is a strong way to model that as we go forward. Thank you very much.